Welcome to Deciphering Growth, the show that explores mental health from every angle. We bring you conversations with personal opinions, stories, and practical tips. We aim to break down the stigma and help you live your best life. So please sit back and let's dive in. Before we begin, we want to remind our listeners that this podcast represents the opinions of Tiffany Graves, Eric Stone, and the show's guests. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Please consult a healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed are our own and do not represent those of our workplaces. Listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content does not establish a doctor-patient relationship.
All right, we are back after a really, really long hiatus.
We did have a hiatus. We've been busy, haven't we?
We've been
Gosh.
very busy.
It's almost like we work jobs and do this as a passion project. But we're glad to be here. Um, we, well, we are both good. I just want to give a shout out to a previous person who came on. The episode that dropped really recently was for Chris Perry. I know the order of listing, but we just want to thank Chris Perry again for coming on and speaking about first responders and just the impact they face with mental health. Really great episode. If you've happened to miss it, highly, highly recommend. He discloses his experience with PTSD, how he came to figuring that out and facing. So, a little plug to go back and listen if you haven't. I'm really proud of that episode. And again, Chris, if you're listening, brother, thank you for joining us and speaking with us.
Yes, we do appreciate anytime a guest comes on and shares their very personal experiences. Yeah.
For today, we do not have a wonderful guest speaker. We have our wonderful host, me and Tiffany. I'm just kidding. Tiffany and I are excited to kind of continue. As Tiffany was telling me, I believe this is our 58th recording today.
62.
62? Geez. They really sneak past you. It's because of the break. That's awesome. But we just want to say thank you for being here, but also we're continuing to find new topics and new things to talk about. So today we're going to talk a bit more about trauma-informed couples therapy. Um, I'm a nerd. I have talked about couples therapy multiple times already today, even done couples therapy today for some of my patients. So I'm really excited to talk about this. It's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. But Tiffany, I don't want to steer us already. So is there anything you'd like to say about trauma-informed couples therapy?
I was just briefly going to define it from what I've found, not the expert on couples here. Want to make that very clear. And that it is therapy that focuses on safety, empowerment, and collaboration.
Well, I love that. So, as a couples therapist, I think there's just a lot of really great things happening. I love how many shows there are. There is this really great show just called Couples Therapy, some really beautiful sessions. Those people are all confident. One, I would never be a therapist that wants my sessions recorded for TV or as a couple have my stuff out there. But I want to say thank you to those people because it's been really cool just challenging the stigma around couples therapy. Like, what does it look like? Really demystifying it. So, really cool. If you're ever interested, really great show. I also think of the great show that won a lot of awards here recently, Shrinking, doing some really great work. Um, I would love Harrison Ford to be my therapist. That's not why we're here, but I'm very open to that. If he's taking fake clients for the show, I'll follow up. But there just tends to be sometimes different challenges. So there's nothing wrong with maybe someone going to couples therapy not wanting to work on trauma. But a lot of people, just being honest, are impacted by trauma in some form or fashion from their past, their present, or maybe the concern of how they would handle situations in the future. So really just today want to talk about some of the principles like I as a couples therapist am bringing. So kind of without kind of going just straight to some of the bigger stuff, I do want to give some trigger warnings today. To talk about trauma informed couples therapy, I will need to talk about safety from domestic violence, how that is screened for in couples therapy. I'm just reviewing my notes, and a little bit about childhood trauma and wounds we carry as adults. So I do just want to offer that. I will say, if you hang with us, I do have some activities to kind of wind us down at the end of the recording. But just would feel ill-advised to not offer that for those listening with us. We appreciate you being here, but if that's not the right time, would just encourage you to pause or maybe come back to this. Okay,
I'm excited.
so
It's the first time we've had some activities.
I'm excited. I feel like it's the quote from Step Brothers, so much room for activities.
Yay!
So, first things first is screening for domestic violence. So, every good couples therapist is screening all of their couples and relationships for domestic violence. This needs to be done separately. So, one of the methods that I am trained in involves having a individual session with each partner. That is with the Gottman method to ask those questions. It is not effective to screen with a partner present. So if you ever are in a couples therapy session, that is why. I love the Gottman checkup. There's a lot of other questions that are asked there. Um, I also want to just make sure when we're talking about domestic violence, we are not just talking about physical abuse or emotional abuse. We're talking about things like financial abuse, isolation, gaslighting, even just threats of things like whether that's like items that one cares about. So there's just a lot of different things that are toxic. But genuinely, any decent couples therapist, relationship therapist is going to screen and ensure that safety. So not just physically, um, but emotionally. Also, working on a place of trust. So, someone having good intentions for therapy, like coming in openly, wanting to protect the privacy of that space, not wanting to weaponize it against the part. Um, Also, working together. It doesn't really go well if one person comes in and talks for a full hour and the other person doesn't get to speak or is screaming, yelling, throwing every issue they've ever had. That is also not what couples therapy is. It's a collaborative space to work on shared goals. Both voices are equal and the goals are set together with the therapist. And we want it to be an empowering experience where people are getting to make their own decisions about healing and boundaries. Um, and just acknowledging like some of the different dynamics. So I will say my experiences in couples therapy, I am Christian and do have those experiences and do work with clients from that identity. But there's a huge spectrum of Christianity that I won't get all the way into on this podcast, but I know it comes up sometimes. Um, but I'm not in that place to judge different relationship dynamics. So if someone is choosing a relationship maybe different from my own, that's not my place to judge, but I am going to screen for that safety and also let people choose what kind of relationship they are wanting, or in some cases, not wanting. But too often, therapy historically has some problematic past of what that was looking like, blaming one partner or the other, or putting different things. So for me in couples therapy, my goal is not to keep people together. My goal is to help people have the best relationship they can have if they are choosing to stay together, but also decide what are they looking for in a relationship. Some people may find that challenging or disconcerting, but I argue you can't have a safe relationship if one person feels consistently trapped or like they have no control. I don't really feel like that's a holistic view of love that, oh, I can't go anywhere else. That doesn't sound like love. That sounds like kidnapping. So I'm just throwing that out there, Tiffany, as we're getting started, because I think you kind of have to hear where I'm coming from to get into some of these other pieces.
Yeah.
Any Yeah, go for it.
I just say it's really kind of reassuring that there are these very in-depth processes to go through to make sure, like, when you are going into couples counseling with a varying degree of issues present, that there are safety measures to make sure like things don't escalate in the first session if something comes up that like you're unaware of.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Mm.
One of the things we're just talking about with trauma informed is just this basic understanding of trauma. So I know we've talked a lot about this, Tiffany, but just understandings like maybe someone has a different level of hypervigilance. So sometimes one partner, if we just use the example of a car accident, one partner can be absolutely regular with their nervous system, not having issues, but then maybe another partner is not able to drive or be in the car. But it gets more complicated, like if the trauma was a different situation. So sometimes I work with first responders or veterans, the traumas they've experienced on the job or in those experiences, it changes them, but their partner's not been around. So this can be very difficult, especially if someone's not wanting to share or maybe isn't aware of it or maybe just isn't in a place to do that safely. So sometimes that can be a really common topic of trauma in couples therapy, but also just picking up on those avoidance and numbing behaviors. It's very intense to cope with pain. As we're recording this, there are a lot of issues going on in the world. There are always a lot of issues, but there are many, many issues nationally, internationally, political, health, social, pick which topic. And so it can just be really overwhelming. It's very easy to numb and find things. So that can be challenging of maybe one person being frustrated with how their partner is numbing, judging it, needing it to change, maybe the safety of that. Uh, but also like trust issues. So if people in your life that were supposed to take care of you hurt you, caused trauma, perpetrated trauma, that would make sense that someone would be careful to trust, careful to let their guard down in any setting or some settings. Really, we do pick up a lot of things from early childhood. And like, how did we see our family system? How did we see our guardians interacting? What was love shown like? That is something we bring into all our relationships, whether we are aware of it or not.
Hmm. Yeah.
And when we're talking about trauma, we can't talk about trauma and not talk about triggers. There are different triggers. One of the challenges with couples therapy is how do we handle situations where both partners are triggered for different reasons? Who do we support? Who do we go? So there's no right or wrong, maybe answers to that. It's very complicated. It's personal to the couple. But in couples therapy, some of the goals we would try to have for trauma informed is bringing awareness of trauma, how it's impacting the person, how it's impacting the relationship, and trying to find ways to induce more safety and reduce re-traumatization. So if someone's reaching out to say, hey, you are safe, like you believe in me, you're going to be here, and that bit is missed, that can add to that trauma, that wound, and then someone being shifted from a safe person to an unsafe person. Like many shows are showing, a lot of focus is on communication in couples therapy, but also just hearing different perspectives, maybe understanding your partner. A lot of times, if there's conflict in a relationship, there's a lot of talking, there's not a lot of listening, or there's maybe no communication. And so it's like just a great way of trying to have effective communication and bring more empathy and understanding.
Hmm.
Uh, and what we will get to later today is some examples of these, but having some regulation strategies, things you can do on your own, things you can do together. But we really can't get into trauma without having those tools in place to have a safe session and have ways for people to handle things that come up outside of session.
Yeah. Making sure there's that safe space for everyone involved.
Yes. So one thing is just we've done so much psychoeducation, and if you really want to hear a podcast episode on the impact of trauma on the nervous system. Check us out. Tiffany has a great discussion about trauma and how it impacts the nervous system in different ways. She is a pro's pro, but not everybody even knows what trauma is. Um, I have this very silly example of like, I used to get really scared traveling. I don't know if it was a trauma response, but I'm just going to say it is for the purpose of this discussion. And I have this memory being at dinner with some friends traveling. uh, I'm in grad school to be a therapist, and they're like, "Oh, hey, why aren't you eating?" I was like, "Oh, I just don't eat when I travel the first day." But it's like, it's just a thing. I'm fine. And they're like, "That's not that. That's anxiety, or that's like, you know." And I was like, "Oh." So sometimes you just don't have that insight of like, "Oh my gosh, that is what that is." That is a trigger. That is this. So really, just basic understanding, basic education of what that looks like, but just doing some grounding exercises. Um, I'm gonna just do one right now. So easiest one ever. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you smell, 1 thing that you taste. I tell all my clients you don't have to memorize. If you mess up the order, it's okay. You still checked in with your 5 senses. So Tiffany, I'll do it, and then I'll have you do it if that's okay. So I can see my cough drops, my fidgets, my football fidget, and my chapstick. I can touch my pen, my computer, my dog, and my footstool. I hear my fish tank, my sand tray, and my air. I smell my candle and my cough drops, and I can taste my cough drops.
I do mine slightly different. For one, I do name one positive thing about the day.
Well, aren't you a good therapist changing things up?
Well, it's
I
it's so
love it.
hard. It's so hard to like have cough drops or something to put in your mouth when you're out and about. But
If you always have a cough drop, you'll never be ill prepared. Eric Stone, 2025. No, I'm just kidding. That's good. That is a common question clients bring up.
I never have anything to put in my mouth, and like I'm just like, just do a positive thing about yourself. That's solves the problem. But 5 things I can see is my chapstick, my computer screen, keyboard, my notepad, my pen. 4 things I can touch is my tea mug, my mouse, my keyboard, my pen. 3 things I hear is my computer humming, the AC running, and I'm gonna lie and say there's birds outside because everything else is quiet.
Because you
Two things I smell is my candle and my tea. And one positive thing for the day is we got some rain.
we do need the rain. In classic Midwest fashion, we do need the
Yeah.
rain. Very easy. I'm gonna say, Tiffany, I'm polling the audience. I'm gonna say you pass. It's just the two of us, but I think that was good. It was good. Other things could just be some fidget tools, taking a breath, pet your dog, take a reset, go outside, touch some grass, go touch a tree, go for a walk.
I
Just do
cannot
something.
get the image out of my head. I can't remember what cartoon it was that they joked out touching grass and someone went out and just like rubbed the grass.
There's some type of therapy modality that I'm not trained in, and I don't know how I feel about it. That is literally like you bring grass inside and then incorporate it for grounding. Um, I'll look into it, but
Or
not
like turf or actual grass.
both.
I should bring in some Easter grass and just like throw everyone off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make fun of it, like, but I also like we have to use evidence based. So I'm curious, but just Sandy, go outside, take it like just even the temperature change, right? Of being outside to indoors, or like Tiffany talked about the rain, feeling the rain. So just helpful reminders. Um, but also just having some ways of checking in. We don't always realize, the little things like a kiss goodbye, a hey, what's your day looking like? How was your day? How's the day going? hey, what do you want to do this week? Like, we just get so much from that. I mean, even just the ritual of like, how do you handle if someone's sick? How do you handle if there's just very, very helpful. Uh, in general, just having some of those outlets. But also, we are working a lot on communication skills. I could nerd out, but that is a lot of what therapy is. But I will say, whether it's the Gottman method or EFT, different therapies, like it's really boils down to making it work for your relationship and yourself. Um, I had a couple who, in the Gottman method, it's called a break. They were inspired by the Snickers commercial and they called it Snickers. And I thought it was awesome, but it actually really worked well for them. And they were able to honor the break and it worked very well. Um, Sometimes, there's some understanding of differences like neurodivergence. I'm known to sometimes be prone to want to talk really, really fast and go. So sometimes it's bringing that understanding for uh, different types of couples and just kind of understanding their partner's way of approaching.
Yeah. Those wonderful different communication changes. Like looking at my notes and I'm like, where do I throw in the neuro stuff?
I think you can honestly, because I do have some things here about understanding that neurological piece of safety and maybe some of the things that are happening in therapy regarding trauma. I mean, feel free. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. I was like, I don't want to like put it in the wrong spot. Not that there is a wrong spot since we're doing off this cuff, but I just like the fight, flight, and freeze and fawn responses kind of were coming up for me since that's a communication, like part of that communication style and pattern. And that's just how your nervous system interprets a partner's words or tone of voice. Um, sometimes it can interpret something as a threat, even if it's not intended that way. Your amygdala can get hyperactive. This is sometimes why traumatized brains are quick to perceive danger, which can lead to quick escalations and communication breakdowns. Your prefrontal cortex can shut down. So trauma can impair problem solving and regulation during arguments or communication breakdowns. And your hippocampus and memory. Couples may re-experience old hurts if they're happening in the here and now, due to impaired contextual memory from trauma experiences.
Wow. The nervous system is such an interesting thing. Each person's different.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes just having that space can be helpful.
Yeah, I just to say sometimes your nervous system is just an asshole. It like decided to hold on to all the negative things, and it's like now you get to deal with them. And I'm like, why?
Well, it's tough because like, sometimes like I really have been couples, they've not been able to find a way to have safe discussions or productive discussions. So then therapy becomes like this window of helping their nervous system stay in a comfortable range,
Mhm.
and having the discussion. But um yeah, couples therapy is not a bunch of screaming and yelling. Sometimes there's big emotions, but it's really like, how can we find that window of tolerance? How can we have productive conversations and maybe bring understanding to traumas that aren't maybe as understood, whatever they may be?
My metaphor is going to be how can we hug your nervous system?
That's really sweet and kind.
That being said, trauma triggers and relationship dynamics can really be disproportionate to reactions. Sometimes there's projection and reenactment involved. This is your wheelhouse, but the role of polyvagal theory, safe connection versus defense states, cues of safety, tone of voice, facial expressions, and posture can really help create a healthier foundation for, creating calmer nervous systems that feel like they're supported, and a foundation for healthier communication patterns.
Um, I think that's very interesting. Um, I think maybe the quickest thing on polyvagal theory as it connects to this is just this idea of being activated in that fight, flight, uh, flee reaction. I think it can be very overwhelming for a lot of people when they're in that state, but some people don't recognize they're there all the time or maybe consistently having issues being there. And so sometimes it's drawing that attention, but also finding things that people can do on their own to get out of that place or things with their partner. And so that is something too of like, how can we approach this? I will say a lot of my couples are parents. And so legitimately one of the things we have to talk about is like, what could you do around your kids? What could you do? Just not because everyone can't just leave the house, go for a run. Those are just some big there's some big logistical barriers sometimes.
That makes me, we're gonna hot seat Eric for a minute. When you're working with parents and they're in that situation, like getting escalated or being triggered in front of children, how do you handle it? Like for the people out there, like probably scratching their brain in the same way, I'm like,
Mm.
what are some general like tips that we could use, or do you go about dealing with that?
Well, I think for kids, as a parent myself, I do relate to those challenges. So I try to be really specific of like what is the setting and age of the kids, but if in general, if it's a car, just putting some music on, kind of tabling that discussion, if it's not going well. I know some parents won't have conflict in front of their kids, some will, so that's not a judgment statement, but just kind of agreeing to pause. Um, where it gets really hard, to be really honest, is like if both parents are dysregulated, but your kids require parental supervision, they can't be left on their own, and that gets tough. So I honestly can't give a blanket statement to that, but I will say what I try to do is help my couples identify maybe who is more dysregulated if they can, or trying to rotate that. Um, is it like, can you be in the room with your kid and just sit for a second, maybe have your phone? And this isn't where I'm judging parents. It's like, can you put an episode of a show on for your kids? Can you give them a toy or a snack? I mean, few minutes, or can you rotate? Can one of you step out for a few minutes and the other come back and kind of do something like that? But I would say there's really not a right answer, but I mean, there are some wrong ones, like getting really explosively angry, throwing things, screaming, yelling, like that's not helpful. So I would say there are some wrong ways to handle that, but I will say it's tough if that's the dynamic you've witnessed your parents show their anger and conflict, or I have a lot of clients who have never seen conflict with their parents, so they don't really have a comparison, or the comparison is very dramatic. They witnessed a lot of things.
Yeah. I went it can be frustrating to be sometimes on either end of the spectrum of like being in a family that role modeled explosive arguments and then figuring out a system moving forward that works for you that's different than that, or being on the opposite end where like hard conversations were never role modeled, and when you get into a place of having to have conversation like hard conversations, figuring out skills for that as well.
Yeah, and I would say maybe on that, I know there's just so many different cultural pieces or types of relationships. So, like, you might notice I don't say very definitive statements other than about domestic violence. I'm very comfortable making definitive statements, but genuinely, every relationship is different. There are different beliefs. And so, as long as my only thing is, as long as someone is willingly and enthusiastically choosing, so basically with consent, that is their business, that is not mine. We could get into the nuances of people feeling controlled or less options, but I really think that there are lots of different types of relationships. And so I would say as a couples therapist, my goal is not to judge or make people feel judged, but just to help support them with the goals they have or find steps forward. I'm not trying to be toxic masculinity. I will say that a lot of my male clients like myself, were maybe growing up less accustomed to maybe using their emotional intelligence or practicing those skills, not because they can't, just because of socialization. So it's kind of finding ways they can build those skills and muscles. And they do fantastic work. Sometimes it's building their skills while their partner is working on something else, but sometimes it's different things we're working on, which is one of the beautiful things of couples therapy, relationship therapy, but also one of the challenges, is you may be in a different place, but growing together. Um, just looking in, I thought I might just offer a sample session, like outline if it was a 1 hour session. So typically, there's a check-in, how is the week going? Anything come up of significance, worth sharing? Doing a little winding in, maybe a little grounding, and then focusing on maybe a specific trigger, or maybe like working on developing safety outlets for the couple, and then kind of practicing whatever that is in the session. And then just making that plan for homework, and ways to kind of unwind. We really need homework in therapy, 1 hour a week or every other week or whatever the case may be. So much more time outside of therapy to do that. And I will just say, maybe you're listening and you're not sure if you want to do couples therapy, like that's okay. There are lots of great free resources like the Gottman website. They share a lot of great free articles or even sometimes workshops for couples. Um, they charge a small fee, but there's even like a Gottman card deck with some great questions to kind of facilitate. But just checking in, like what do you know about your partner's world? What do they enjoy about their life? Really different things.
Yeah. Being able to utilize all the resources that are around you and take the steps in a manner that like makes sense for you. Like there's no pressure to rush or push through anything. I did have maybe a hot seat question, maybe another hot seat question. If someone is considering trauma-informed couples work, how would you define or help someone understand what the therapist's role is in couples counseling?
What is the role of the couples counselor and what? I'm so sorry.
In trauma-informed couples work.
Setting the pace. So setting expectations and boundaries and holding that safety is on the couples therapist. If you go too quickly, push too hard, too fast, you're going to overwhelm one or both partners. So that is the role of the couples therapist. Sometimes that's really powerful. Like maybe a partner's used to having to worry about taking care of the partner, which there's nothing wrong with taking care of partners. I want to be very specific, but like to carry that while you're trying to work through your own stuff is very unhelpful. Um, but also making sure it's safe, feeling non-judgmental, was actually on my list too, to make sure to share. So I think pacing, safety. I would say as a trauma-informed couples therapist, I say a lot of what we're going to do. Like, this is what we're going to talk about today. This is the plan. This is what we'll talk about next time. Giving people outlets, like if we ever, like I talk with all my couples, like, hey, if for whatever reason we can't have that conversation that day, just let me know and I'll still check in with you. Um, but yeah, it can be really beautiful. I don't think it has to be a negative thing. I think it's cool how trauma-informed therapy is. Um, it can be just the language we use, the screening, but yeah, that part would be on the couples therapist, not on like you don't have to come in and manage your partner's trauma. That would be for the therapist to do.
Yeah. Thank you for letting us know like what is the therapist's responsibility. Maybe clarifying some role uh responsibilities for people out there considering couples therapy.
You are so welcome.
Yeah.
And I think that's like everything I had, but I don't know if you have more.
I didn't have a lot since this is your area of expertise outside of like talking about the neurobiology of trauma and how it can like interact with couples, and it can like cause couples to like unintentionally escalate each other or intentionally. Can't point one finger or the other. But other than that, like, yeah, most of mine was just questions for you since you're the expert on couples therapy here.
Well, thank you for letting me talk about this. It's something I'm sure we'll talk about more of, but I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, is there any last wrap-up points you want to share with our listeners?
Talk to your partner and just honor their experiences as you're approaching working on whatever the case may be.
Oh. And my last tidbit is healing in couples therapy is not about erasing trauma, but about creating new neural pathways of safety and connection together with your partner. That being said, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Deciphering Growth. We hope you found our conversation helpful and insightful. Subscribe to our podcast for more episodes and check out our Patreon for more content. Don't hesitate to contact us on social media if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.